Right, the meeting is now live.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the meeting and welcome to any members of the public who are listening at home. I don't think I need to remind you of the procedures for the meeting. It's the usual ones. If you want to speak, just raise your hand. And I'll take the order of speaking as in the way that whoever comes first on the list. I would ask you, please, to make sure your microphone's muted and that you only on mute for the sake of speaking, please. Otherwise, there's a lot of echoes and vibrations. The advantages of a virtual meeting is that I don't need to warn you about where the fire escapes and things are. Hopefully, you can all hear me and see me. Right, looking at the agenda then, the first item is apologies for absence. Seeing that we're all here, I think the answer is there aren't any. So we'll move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 10th of June. Since the minutes were printed, it's been brought to my attention that there is a mistake in part of the minutes. On page 4, which is the back page of the minutes, I want to draw your attention, please, to a mistake which Mr. Koniski pointed out to us. On the last page, there are under resolved, there are 3 bullet points. And the last one, which says questions at cabinet be unrestricted in terms of content. That should be restricted, not unrestricted. So on the understanding that we changed that to restricted, are there any other accuracy points which any of you who were at the meeting and have got to raise, please?
Nope.
Otherwise, in the absence of anybody saying anything, I assume you're happy with the minutes.
Andrew, can I just ask on page 6 on my iPad? Yeah, but I guess it's 5. It said the review into the following was questions at cabinet be unrestricted in terms of content and public statements. Is that something that we will be considering today?
Yeah, that comes up under item 6, I think it is, on today's agenda.
Okay, thank you.
But just for the sake of accuracy of the minutes, can I take it? Are you all happy with that? If you are, I'll sign it after the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, declarations of members' interests. Has any of you got an interest to declare? Nobody's saying they have, so I'm assuming that's no. In which case we move on to item 4, which is announcements. I don't have any announcements. I'll just check. Sharon, have you any announcements from the Chief Executive or from yourself?
No, I haven't, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on, please, to item 5, which is a review of the policy development advisory groups. This committee is asked to take a view on this. So I'm going to hand over now to the Director of Corporate Resources to take us through it. So hopefully, Jane, if you can take over for now.
Lovely. Thank you, Chairman. You may be wondering where this came from, or you may not, because your memory may be incredibly good to when we had the Corporate Peer Challenge last autumn. One of the findings of the Corporate Peer Challenge, and I will read it to you, there is a well-recognised and ongoing discussion about the policy development advisory groups. It appears that currently most new items for Cabinet go to a policy development advisory group, which, whilst allowing good member involvement for policy development, seems rather excessive and potentially could undermine the role of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Concerns about the current governance arrangement in this area were repeatedly raised by both members and officers. Some officers were of the view that the current arrangements, whilst engaging members, added additional work and could undermine Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The peer team share these concerns and believe that changes in this area would strengthen scrutiny while still enabling councillors to be engaged. The peer team suggests that a review of the governance arrangements in relation to policy development advisory groups and scrutiny is needed to clarify the role of Overview and Scrutiny Committee and how the council wishes to conduct pre-decision scrutiny and engagement. Their recommendation, therefore, was to consider having a review of this relationship. Now, you may have wondered where that went once after that, because it didn't come immediately to you. It actually went to the Audit Committee as part of the review of the annual governance statement. So the annual governance statement then includes a recommendation that the Governance Committee review the functions of policy development advisory groups, putting forward changes by the end of September. You'll realise, of course, we actually haven't done anything on this by the end of September and completely missed the deadline. So we'll have to change that to the end of March. I don't think that's a major issue. With all the work that we were doing during the COVID issues, I didn't actually have any resource to give you to help you out. So in order for you to do this review, what I've done is I've asked our 2 graduate trainees to be available to help you do some legwork on this. And they're the 2 people that you see joining the meeting that you may not be that familiar with. Lucy Melvin, who's been with us for a year now, and Peter Wood, who's not been with us for more than about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. I've asked them to look at this work. They've already started off a little bit and can tell you what they've done so far. But what we really want from you today is a little bit of scoping of their work, what you think we should do, who you think we should talk to. Should we use questionnaires? Should we talk to people? And who should we talk to if we do talk to them? And then when they've done their work, bring it back to you so that you can make decisions about what we should do with this going forward. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to pass over to Lucy, who can tell you a little bit about the work they've done so far.
Thank you, Jane. I think Peter's going to begin and give a little bit of an overview of what we've done over the past few weeks.
Yeah, so obviously we're very early on in a review and we need your input to know exactly where we're going with it. But we thought we'd have a look at some other authorities and see how they do backbencher engagement and overview and scrutiny. So we've identified 6 authorities and we're looking at how they compare to us. And we were thinking of going into doing some sort of online survey of members and key officers as to what people think overviewing PDAGs could be done in the future and how they could change to be more useful and also so they don't step on the toes of overview and scrutiny. That's where we are at the moment, and then Lucy's got a couple of things on where we might go from there.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, so I can give you a quick summary of what we are proposing to do in the coming months. But as we've said, we really appreciate any pointers and some scoping on what you think. Our preliminary research is complete. As Peter said, we've done a bit of research into other councils, and we're in the planning stages of thinking about some surveys and interviews. We've timetabled in to do that in the remainder of October and throughout November, and we proposed that they could be open to all members and sort of the lead officers that are involved in PDAGs. We also proposed that we could carry out some more in-depth interviews with a smaller group of some lead officers and members, and those 2 would obviously culminate in us doing a report that we can produce together, and they can show some of the finer details of our findings and subsequent recommendations. We can obviously present our key findings and recommendations to the committee. We're really keen to produce some informed and useful recommendations, but more than happy to have any questions, and do let us know if there's any particular concerns you have or anything in particular that we could explore as part of our review. Thanks.
Thank you. Christian, I see your hands up. Do you want to speak?
Chairman, thank you. I'll speak because some members, backbench members, such as Councillor Tony Bradham and myself, were fairly instrumental in making sure that we had what are successors to the cabinet member advisory groups, the PDAGs, set up because things came to a head about this time 4 years ago, where things weren't quite as they ought to have been. And I met with the leader, with Tony and the then chairman, Councillor Utan, and through the governance review in 2015 and 16, we got to a position where we've got PDAGs, and we got to a position where, since the constitution was voted on in December 2016, I've not had one cause to complain about the council's governance and meetings and how they're held and why they're held and who's on the meetings and so on and so on. And so, in my view, that speaks volumes, because we were not in a very good place 4 years ago. And I don't think today is perhaps helpful to go over it. But what I will say is I'm surprised that this review's come up. I'm surprised nobody from the LGA sought my views, because, you know, to say I was emailing the head of legal almost daily would not be untrue. And it got to a point that our then head of legal, with the assistance of a very good officer, Mr. Bix, really got ourselves now into a position. Maybe others view and differ, and we'll hear from that. And I'm obliged, you know, we've got Councillor Circus, but we have got ourselves to a position where I've not had cause to complain in any way at all on our governance. I've yet to hear anyone seriously complain, which was a regular complaint until we got our constitution shipshape with the PDAGs. Oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, I didn't know about that. Nobody told me about this. I just don't hear it. And when people have grumbled about it, and I'm all one for making sure that everything's done fairly, I've had to sort of either say or think to myself, well, that's not quite right. So, first of all, I've read the peer review. I don't agree with it. I think it's a flawed report. I don't know. I don't quite understand how on earth they didn't come and speak to someone like myself or Councillor Bradnam, who've got very firm views on making sure that we have the very best governance. I don't agree that there's a suggestion that these PDAGs are somehow unique or odd to Horsham. We had advisory groups, the cabinet members, from our original constitution in the year 2000, when obviously following the then government's view, we adopted the cabinet model. They didn't work very well. They started up, they met, then they stopped. Then they weren't regulated. What used to happen is a cabinet member would say, oh, I'd like an advisory group on X, I don't know, a skateboard in a park. They would handpick who went on it. They would choose the time it met. Nobody would know when it met, where it met, what the minutes were. When I sat down with the leader, with Tony, what we all agreed on is that we wanted a clear view of policy so that members could, from all parties, could see that where the genesis of policy was coming from. And I have to say that we have got into a position, the PDAGs I've been on and been members of, such as Phillips I've been on since its inception, and Councillor Chowan's I was on until the start of this new council, and I'm on Councillor Peter Burgess's. They are all excellent. And I really mean that. I really mean that. They meet. If they are adjourned, which is very rarely, then they do still meet. Before in the advisory groups, it would just drift. There is agendas, notes. They're superb. And we don't have this view anymore where, well, I didn't know about that. Because if anyone doesn't know, they can ask in the advisory group. And if they're not happy with the cabinet member's view, for whatever reason, there's always one, sometimes two, even sometimes three senior officers there. And of course, officers different to national civil servants, they serve all the members, whether they're of the majority party or not. So I think we've got ourselves into an excellent position. But I think what any review will need to do is look at the history of the PDAG and why it came about. And really, we had to start at square one, which was, do we want a cabinet model or a committee model? There was a very small minority in support of the committee system. I was one of them. And the majority view was that we stuck with the cabinet model. The next step was, how do we bolster the cabinet? And we were advised that in Tunbridge Wells, in Royal Tunbridge Wells, one option is to have this hybrid of a committee and a cabinet model. And it's out of that hybrid that we've got these PDAGs. there in that council, the committee to the cabinet member, which is a hybrid of a committee and a cabinet model, can veto, can place a yellow card to the cabinet member. It was decided that wasn't right for Horsham, but it was decided that we wanted an advisory group to a cabinet member that was stronger than the old advisory group, but not so strong that they had the constitutional power to put a yellow or even a red, I think it was a yellow card, they could stall a decision. And then ultimately the cabinet member could override that representation. And so we've got the PDAGs. And certainly for the refuse collection, went through seamlessly. We at the PDAG agreed fortnightly bin collections. We agreed side rear loaders, having been side loaders. And the then director was meticulous in bringing that through to PDAG. We, following that, not only was the implementation totally successful, but nobody's grumbled about it since. Not serious grumbles in such as, oh, that decision was taken in a flawed way, or I never had my input into it. So I'm just raising now that we've only had the PDAG since 2017, and I'm very concerned, I say very concerned with a big underline, that already we're seeking to review it. I don't think it conflicts with scrutiny. It was recognised that the PDAGs in a way would be a form of pre-scrutiny. But what's the alternative? Is the alternative that we don't have them as robust as we do, and we go back to members with good reason, as they were then 4 years ago, saying, I wasn't aware of that coming down the line. And people saying they're not happy. And then we end up, and remember, we're a larger council than we were before, because following the boundary review, we have more members. We then have the point that members feel that they're not engaged. So I'm all for a review, but I will want to make sure I've shared the history. And we're not talking about ancient history, we're talking about very recent history. And I think that things have gone well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I'll
fine.
stop. You're right.
Yes.
I think I've made the point, but I'm just
point.
raising a big yellow card here and saying, careful where we're going with this, because in my view, it's working very, very well.
Yeah, okay, that's a point taken, but the fact is it's just a review. But I will ask, there's somebody else, Councillor Burgess, Karen Burgess wishes to speak. Karen?
Thank you, Chairman. Most of which I was going to say, Christian has beaten me to it, eloquently as ever. Yes, I think certain councillors did feel a little bit out on a limb. They didn't feel as if they were consulted, and as backbenchers, they weren't valued perhaps as they should have been. PDAG, I think, is an excellent way of the backbenchers being able to voice their opinions on things, and the cabinet members very clearly listen and take it on board. Also, the benefit of the PDAGs is that if you're only on 2 or 3 and you have an interest in a subject coming up at another PDAG, you are actually allowed to visit it. And although you're not technically allowed to speak, most times the chairman will let you, or the cabinet member will let you speak. So nobody feels as if they're being blinkered or not allowed to have their say or opinion or view, or actually being heard on things that are going on. So I think, yes, possibly a review, but I think if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nobody else seems to want to speak, but my view is similar to yourselves. I'm on 2 PDAGs. I think they work extremely well. But the point of this exercise is just to review them. So we can even ask, I'd like to ask the officers how you propose to get volunteers. Are you going to do a general invitation, which is probably what you need to do, and ask people to volunteer to be spoken to? How are you going to do that, please?
I think we would actually, well, we haven't planned anything in minute detail, because I can tell you we have no view on this at all. With the odd exception that I have a personal objection to taking Microsoft licenses to finance and assets. But apart from Microsoft licenses, which is really boring, dull topic, we haven't got any particular issues. Lucy and Peter, completely new to the organisation, not here in 2016, and I wasn't here very long in 2016 because it's the year I joined the council. So we don't have the history. All we're doing is finding out, reporting it back to you. We were certainly intending to at least do a questionnaire to every councillor and then talk to some. So we're obviously picking up key names here. Christian, because he was heavily involved at the time. Tony, obviously Tony Bevis as well as the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, because he'll have a view. Sadly, obviously, we haven't got Leonard anymore, because I know he voiced some of these views during the peer challenge. So, you know, nobody's coming at this with a view, this is a review to axe them. It's a review because it was suggested we did a review. And to recollect those opinions from people.
Thank you. I've got two more speakers, two more councillors wishing to speak. Councillor Haig, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Mitchell made some really good points there, and a lot of those could be picked up within the consultation. In particular, he mentioned what is the alternative, and it may be that that's something that can be explored from how the other 6 councils work. And I'd like to know which other 6 councils are being looked at and why. But also, I mean, we all have a mixture of experience. Some people go back as far as the committee stage. Some people have just come in fairly new and have only known PDAGs. So the surveys to councillors will be very important in finding out what people think of them and how they work from those different perspectives.
Thank you. I agree with you. Next speaker, please, Councillor Philip Circus.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I hope, incidentally, the chiming clock behind me is not causing you any problems. When we discussed this in Cabinet, I think one of the things that came across is that we all have a different approach to things, and my approach, as Christian may have implied, is that I have a fairly laid-back approach. I like people to tell me what they think, and the whole point of a PDAG is to get as big a range of backbench opinion as possible. Other people see it differently. Other people perhaps think there should be more direction from the cabinet member. I mean, to be honest, it's mirrored in committees generally. I mean, it's not peculiar to PDAGs. But I suppose the question I'm asking is whether it's thought desirable to achieve a bit of conformity with the way PDAGs operate, or whether people are happy that PDAGs, in the way they operate, reflect the personality of the relevant cabinet member.
Thank you. That was really a comment, Councillor Circus, wasn't it? You're not expecting...
Oh, I'm sorry. But I've asked a question.
No, you don't have to, but I'm just saying you didn't want a response, did you?
No, I just thought it worth pointing.
It's just a comment. Thank you.
I thought that worth putting into the equation.
No, it is. Your Councillor Bradnam next, please.
Mine's not a question either, Chairman. I would just like to say that, having been a member of the planning PDAG for the my first term of office, and I'm currently a member of the Waste and Environment PDAG, I'm very happy with that, because I can't see how I, as a backbencher, without reading every word of every document that comes out of the council, which of course is impossible for everybody, I would know what's going on. I don't know what's going on unless I attend some of these PDAGs, and I do want to know what's going on, and so do the residents where I live. So I think that I think they play a very important part. And I think there's some truth in what Councillor Circus says, in that the individual cabinet member has a certain way of running their PDAG, but I've been very happy with my experience of them, so I wouldn't wish to see it change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skip, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've listened to the eloquence of Christian, and he certainly puts a very good perspective about PDAGs. and I wouldn't wish to sort of go against that. But I think there is an issue that the peer review, or the review that was carried out, talked about PDAGs and overview and scrutiny. And I think what we need to do is actually look at the interface, look at that area between what the PDAG does and actually what scrutiny does. And I think there may be a perception amongst some of the more recent backbenchers who are sitting on scrutiny, that it's, in a way, they may find it, and I don't know whether they do, somewhat confusing to go along to a PDAG, express views, have their views listened to, and the cabinet member take them on board, and then wonder exactly what scrutiny is about, because a lot of those views are expressed. So I think we ought to just explore the reasoning behind the comment about PDAGs and scrutiny and the overview. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Councillor Lloyd, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm really, my point was really being, or has been made by Councillor Skip. I would just like to know exactly why we are going to be having this review, and why it was felt that it was undermining overview and scrutiny. Because frankly, I found them to be hugely informative, very engaging, and a great deal of work seems to get done. So I really wouldn't like to see this change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, can I go back to Jane or one of the officers? Just as a matter of curiosity, which councils have you picked on, and how did you arrive at them?
Lucy, do you want to answer that one? I know you sort of chose some, including Tunbridge Wells, of course, which was the starting point for all this.
Sorry, muted there. There's 6 in total, which we looked into. I can talk about the 3 that I looked into, and I can pass over to Peter to talk about the 3 that he looked into. The reasoning, so the 3 that I looked at was Crawley, Oxfordshire and Tunbridge Wells. Obviously, the link between Tunbridge Wells was their similar PDAG structure, but it was interesting there to look at the slight changes and maybe the slight areas of difference there. Crawley I looked into because I saw they did a similar review into the democratic structures in 2016, and Oxfordshire because there is a similar structure, again with some small differences. So they were ones which shared some similarities but had some small differences.
Lucy, can I ask you, Oxfordshire, that's a county council, surely?
Yeah, it is a county council.
Okay, but they have PDAGs rather than select committees or scrutinies.
They have they had advisory groups, so they were member selected topics that aligned to the corporate council priorities. So it was a changing agenda and changing format based on the priorities of the council. Okay,
let's ask Peter which 3 he's been looking at or he's planning to get involved with.
So the 3 that I've been looking at are Lewis, Somerset County and Winchester. They've been chosen because they're quite different to us, just to give us an alternative view. They don't have anything really that aligns with PDAG at all, apart from Somerset County, but they've got more of a committee focus, or it's much more like overview and scrutiny has been divided into separate committees that all share that function. And that's just to give us a completely different view of how it could be done, or if it's not done, why not, and how the members there think about it.
Thank you. The reason I ask is because I'm glad the different political parties run some of these, because obviously Crawley is Labour, Lewis I think is no overall control, or it's independents and whatever, Greens, and Liberal I imagine is Winchester I imagine is a Liberal council. So it's good that you've not chosen 6 all run by the same political party. But I think, yeah, when do you expect to do your work, and will you be able to bring it back to another government's in 6 months time, or what's your plan?
Well, Jane gave us a timescale of around Christmas.
Oh, right.
So we're up for the challenge.
All right, good. So you hit the ground running. That's good. Okay, but I think it's important when you do an email to all the councillors explaining what you're doing, and then and asking for volunteers, and then people like Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Bradnam and anybody else who wishes to give you their feedback and historical details, data can contact you.
No,
I
definitely.
think that's a good. I'm just checking. There's nobody else who wishes to speak. No, if anybody else. Oh, Councillor Mitchell. Sorry, he's come back. Councillor Mitchell, yes, please.
Well, I only to say, I mean, the starting point on all these things should be the Constitution. So that, I mean, I won't read it because obviously everyone can go away and read it. Page 74, paragraph 4b, the purpose of each advisory group, policy advisory group, is to advise the cabinet member on key functions and non-key decisions. So that's the very, there's only paragraphs A to G, which broadly set out what a PDAG does, and that's the bare minimum. I mean, obviously, I will engage and I'll look carefully at the preliminary findings, but I do worry that we're reinventing the wheel, because not only did we look at other councils, some councillors physically went to other councils and they sat in meetings and watched them. And I just feel that we're reinventing the wheel 4 years later. So, I mean, yes, if another council has done a new review, then obviously I'm not going to stand in the way and say Horsham now is the panacea, but it's what works for Watch Council. And what we did and implemented has worked to date. And I'm not really quite sure if learning from others is going to help, because we did do that exercise 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think the important thing is we're just doing a review. We're not going to make any changes without doing a proper review. And if there's nothing to be gained by making changes, then I suggest the situation will stay as it is. But Councillor Skip made a valid point about checking the interface between PDAGs and scrutiny. So let's do that as part of the review, and then we'll come back to this committee with the findings. But I hope a lot of members will contribute to the questionnaire or whatever is designed. Has anybody else any comments on that? Otherwise, we're moving on. Okay, thank you. I may have to ask the monitoring officer, is the member of the public? Oh, Mr. Kuniski is present. I beg your pardon. I was going to flick around the agenda because I didn't think he was a present, but he is. So we will go on to agenda item 6. Excuse me. Now, as you know, the role of the committee is to consider and advise the council on matters relating to governance and the constitution. Now, as Councillor Mitchell mentioned, we accepted a revised constitution in December 2016. And at the last meeting of this committee, there was a majority of us in favour of making changes to the constitution, which would allow members of the public to ask questions at a council meeting relating to the powers and duties of the council. In other words, it didn't have to relate just to an item on that agenda, which is what the constitution at the moment says. Now, I did say that it would be a matter for the majority group to agree to any changes to the constitution. Unfortunately, their agreement has not been forthcoming. And I've mentioned this as a matter of courtesy. I did contact Mr. Kuniski and explain to him that the change he wishes to see is unlikely to happen. But I'd like to bring him in now and have his and speak, if you would, please. Mr. Kuniski, you'll need to unmute your phone, I think, unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Just a reminder, prior to the new constitution, the rules in operation for public speaking can be summarised as follows. Public statements at any agenda item of any committee or subcommittee meeting, including full council and cabinet, and pre-submitted questions at just council and cabinet meetings, but with cabinet questions restricted to agenda items only. This practice worked well for many, many years and was fully evidenced by the historic minutes. residents of every other borough or district council in West and East Sussex, maybe, for all I know, the whole of England, are able to ask questions at council meetings on relevant matters that concern them, regardless of the night's agenda. That's why it is called public question time, and that's why it is taken very early on in the meeting agenda before the main business starts. Unfortunately, Horsham residents don't now have this right. Secondly, why can't residents contribute any more to the cabinet debates by making just 2-minute statements at agenda items, like they can still do for other committee meetings, including full council? In my view, the ability to make such a statement at cabinet is more valuable than the ability to ask a question at cabinet, restricted to agenda items and before the main business starts. In summary, therefore, I still request that 1. Council public question time is restored to allow questions on any topic within the remit of the council's responsibilities, and 2. Public statements are reintroduced for cabinet agenda items, and personally, I would be unconcerned if this was instead of the existing restricted public question slot at cabinet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, can I just ask the monitoring officer, please, just to clarify the situation regarding statements?
Thank you, Chairman. So we do have we do allow statements as it stands, and the way that the Constitution is drafted, it's not laid out as well as it was, or as clear as it was. But the way that it's drafted in the Constitution as it stands right now, at this present time, is that when we go to questions by members of the public, that is drafted to reflect on what is classed as ordinary meetings of the council. Now, ordinary meetings of the council, if you turn over the page in the Constitution, it gives a list of what goes on at that particular meeting. And it is clear from reading that they are talking about full council and full council only. It does allow for some uncertainty when people have a look at how it is laid out in the Constitution, but it's talking about full council. And what it allows at the moment, so as it is drafted, so public speaking on agenda items, and we're talking full council, parish and neighbourhood councils in the district and members of the public may make a statement on any item on the agenda when the matter arises for debate and at the time appointed by the chairman. And then it gives limited to 2 minutes, and there is an overall time of 12 minutes given to that particular agenda item. So it's 12 minutes, and a statement can be made as it stands at full council meetings. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I must admit, I wasn't on governance in 2016, but the previous constitution had some irregularities and confusing bits, and although we've reissued it since then, I think the existing constitution is still a bit unclear in certain respects, and I think it's something we really need to give serious thought to. What I would like to do, and I'm hoping the monitoring officer has got it on her screen, is for every meeting, whether it be a full council meeting or a cabinet meeting or a scrutiny, an overview and scrutiny meeting, or a planning meeting, or any other meeting, we have defined instructions regarding public questions. Is that something you have available you could put on the screen just to show the sort of things I'm talking about?
Yes, Chairman. So I'm going to attempt to share the screen with everybody. And apologies for initially it might flash up lots and lots of screens, and hopefully I'll highlight the right one. But what the chairman, what Councillor Baldwin has talked about, and it was arranged in a similar way, and the information that went out on our website was arranged in a similar way, in that it dealt with all of the different types of meetings of this council, and it detailed what was allowed and what wasn't. And it's just a simpler way of going through each meeting and addressing what could be allowed or what should be allowed or what could be considered. So I'm going to attempt, it's really as an aid memoir for myself and the chairman, to make sure that we cover all of the types of committee meetings. So I'm going to attempt to do that right now.
Just an example, Sharon.
Yes, I'm apologising. Let's find the right. It is just an example. There we go. I think that's. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, you may have to go look that page down a bit.
Okay, so I've got information for members of the public on asking questions. So what we've done is we've put full council and what is allowed at the moment, and then we go on to dealing with, if I get there, I'm using a touch screen, so I apologise for getting close. Then we go on to committee meetings, so we have a look at that, and then cabinet meetings, and it's just a way of pulling out, if that's what this committee would feel would help us with the constitution, pulling out each individual meeting, and so that the rules are mentioned either separately for each one, or they are written as an overall and overarching for every meeting of this council. So that's
Thank you.
Kind of, if that's
can Councillor Bradnam wishes to make a comment. Before she does, can I just say that doing it this way is just to make it clear to officers and councillors and members of the public what can and can't be asked, or the procedures. It doesn't, unfortunately, deal with Mr. Koniski's request. But Councillor Bradnam, you wish to speak, I believe.
Chairman, thank you. Well, in the Constitution, as it's set out under the various headings for the various committees and meetings, I think that's fine, and I think it should be separated in the way it is, rather than one statement rounding up the whole council. Because, of course, at planning meetings in particular, it is not unusual to have 4 or 5 speakers on each particular issue, and so I think that, in that sense, that it's perfectly all right as this. No, but I do have some sympathy for Mr. Koniski's comments, because I do very much believe in open democracy and fairness, and particularly to members of the public. But I think, as in your opening statement, Chairman, it's quite clear that we've already been down that road and made the decision, haven't we? So I'm not really sure why we're discussing it again. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Well, in the old constitution, we did have a set of rules for each committee and for council. And so the history was, in the constitution, we thought that we would have one set which was overarching. But I'm happy to go back to either how it was or the broad set of rules, and then the detail. Particularly planning has its own set of rules, and even licensing, where the local member can speak but not for as long. So I'm happy with that way. I think where the confusion comes is that we call our council meetings ordinary meetings, because all full council are ordinary unless there's an extraordinary one. And I can see that members of the public might think an ordinary meeting of the council means a committee meeting just as an ordinary meeting. But of course, an ordinary meeting is a special meeting because it's the meeting of the full council, which is the sovereign body of the council. So I can see that having a separate set is fine, but that's where we were before. We were advised that we wanted a slimline constitution, and all those rules got into conflict. So happy to try it differently. It means, I suppose, if somebody wants to update the rules and somebody says, well, perhaps members should have 15 minutes each to speak at planning rather than the current, it means one can change it. It means, I suppose, it makes it a bit more flexible in that regard. So I'm content with that. And Chairman, I agree with your opening. I would like the ability, and hopefully it will come soon, perhaps, but not clearly today, that members, the public can ask questions on topics that aren't on the full council agenda. That's how it used to be, but I don't think anything more can be said about it. I mean, I'd like to see it back, but there we go.
Yeah, thank you. The reason this is on the agenda is, well, partly because at the last meeting it was to consider changes, but also I also went through the constitution for all the councils in West Sussex, together with 4 or 5 in Surrey. And one thing, and it's absolutely right that we are the only ones who don't allow any questions to do with the duties and powers of the council. But also one thing which struck me when I went through the exercise of comparing them and checking them was that a lot of councils, I think every one, or most of them certainly, insist that questions can only be asked by a member of the public who lives in that district or borough or works in that district and borough. Now, the reason this has come forward to tonight's meeting is because the Councillor Circus has drafted a revised wording which we need to discuss, really. Have you got it available, Councillor Circus, or do I need to get the monitoring officer to show it on the screen?
Chairman, I do have it available.
Oh, you have it? Okay,
I will, again, I apologise for there might be a slight delay while I find the correct document, but I will certainly have a go.
I think that'd be helpful, Chairman.
Thank you.
I think this might be it. Does that look familiar?
No.
No.
The screen hasn't changed, Sharon. It's the same as it was before.
Oh, mine has, unfortunately. Right, how do I go about? Maybe I need to change stop share and go again.
Yes, I think that's easiest.
Stop share. And let's go again. Right.
Councillor Skip, I'll bring you in a minute.
Okay.
We're almost there, hopefully. I apologise. Screen share, and I think here we go. Let's try again. Does that look like if I make it slightly larger?
Now, this is the wording which Councillor Circus is recommending we agree tonight, which will then go through to full council, presumably at the December meeting. Whilst you're reading it, Councillor Skip, do you want to make your point now?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I mean, my point is really the salient point for me, that I looked at in the previous constitution, as I'm sure Christian did, and I sat on the governance committee, in which I think that quite frankly this whole area was rather rushed at the time because so much was going on in the constitution, and I don't think we gave it the thought that we should have done. But I do feel quite strongly that actually this should be at council, a public meeting, the opportunity for residents, and they are our residents, and we are their servants in a way, to actually bring their concerns and questions to the meeting. And I think by restricting them to asking questions about the agenda may not be sufficient for quite a few people. Now, we haven't had a lot of people asking questions. I wonder why that is. And I'm sure that there are enough safeguards to ensure that people asking questions not necessarily related to the agenda, those questions will be scrutinized before they would appear on the agenda. So I'm really asking that we open our questions to people who have concerns other than what is on the agenda. And that really is my main feeling about this.
Well, yeah, good point. I need to check with the monitoring officer, because my understanding is if we agree this recommendation on the screen, then as it's a recommendation from governance, it'll have to go to full council in December, I think it's the next meeting. And as it will be an agenda, it will then effectively be an agenda item on the full council meeting, because this is a recommendation from governance. Is that right, please, Sharon?
Yes, Chairman, that's absolutely right. Yes.
So any member of the public could come along to that meeting and speak for or against. Obviously, there'll be the 15-minute time slot or whatever. Is that right?
Yes, they would be questions on notice, so we'd have to know. But again, they could make a statement also, Chairman. So yes.
Okay. So in a way, Councillor Skip, if I've got that right, that would largely deal with your point. Are you okay on that?
No, I'm not happy about that. I understand what you're saying, and I accept the concern. There's questions at full council meeting should only be about the agenda. My point is that people may have an issue which is not on the agenda, which may be for them very important, and the only place that they can bring that question is to our council meeting. And at the moment, on our present constitution, they are not allowed to raise any other questions apart from any question relating to the agenda. And I think that's restrictive, and I don't think it makes us look a particularly user-friendly council. And I think other councils actually do allow questions on the operation of the council, such as may be of importance. So I don't think this goes far enough, and I think it should be go back to the old constitution and the wording of the old constitution.
Yeah, thank you. I understand what you're saying, but as you understand, the point I want to make is that as with political groups, both nationally and with local government, they all have rules, and one of them is that when a group decision is taken, the members are expected to vote for it or at worst abstain, and it happens whether you're Tories or Liberals or Labour. Now the Conservative group or the majority group did look at this in great detail, and the consensus at the time was that they don't wish to allow questions on any subject to be raised at council meetings. I think it's true to say the view was that there are plenty of other opportunities for people to raise points. You could raise it with the chief executive or the leader or the cabinet member, or you've got a district councillor. That's their role. They can get involved. And I think on balance, the feeling was that we don't accept the change which was requested. Now, before I go on any more, I think I might ask Councillor Circus to come in, please. It is.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an interesting comment from Dr. Skip about saying we haven't actually had many questions. We haven't actually had many motions before council, and now they're coming along like, I was going to say London buses, one after another. I think what we have seen is the growth of some quite determined campaigning organisations. We've got Black Lives Matter, we've got Extinction Rebellion, and the concern a number of us had is that what you could end up with is these organisations using this very limited amount of question time to, in effect, grandstand, and in doing so, actually push out any possibility of what I would loosely call genuine questions by residents about the issues that are on the agenda. When the public come and show a great interest in our work, it's usually because there are items on the agenda for that meeting. And it seems perfectly right, given such a limited amount of time, that those questions should be confined to those issues, which will be issues that people, if they've come, will have come to listen to in terms of the debate that's going to take place. So the feeling is very much that we don't want the possibility to exist to use this very limited amount of time as a sort of grandstanding charter, where the real objective is not to ask questions, but to make a statement. And when challenged by the chairman, we all know the way in which this is dealt with. The person making the statement will say something like, "Does the council agree?" I personally believe it would be wrong. There are plenty of opportunities. All of us as councillors regularly get emails from residents about a whole host of issues, and we deal with those. And in many ways, they can be a much better way of dealing with a question, because you can ring up your resident and you can talk to them on the phone and so forth. They often get, I think, more attention than the rather sort of structured environment of questions at council. Is that helpful, Chairman?
Sorry, yes, it's very helpful. Thank you. I've got 3 more speakers. Councillor Skip, you've still got your hand up. Do you want to come back on that?
Sorry, yeah, I can't get my my thing to work because I got this this piece of paper on front. I mean, I think in the answer to Councillor Circus, and I understand what he's saying. I don't think that one could dismiss what he's saying, but I think I have to point out that in the present constitution, 4A12 says that the head of paid service may reject a question if it is not about a matter for which the council has a responsibility or which affects a district, is defamatory, frivolous or offensive, is substantially the same as a question which has been put at a meeting of the council the past 6 months, or requires the disclosure of confidential or exempt information. It seems to me we have a safeguard in our constitution to prevent the frivolous or the obvious sort of offensive or whatever it is. And just to say, well, there may be somebody grandstanding, I don't think should take away the right of our residents to actually come to our council, their council, we're elected by them, their council, and ask a question which may well be perturbing them. So I still don't see why we shouldn't go back to the wording of the original constitution as far as council question time.
Okay, thank you. The next person to wish to speak is Councillor Haigh, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm quite shocked by what you said about the fact that we are the only council that doesn't seem to allow questions from our community. It's a very strange situation to be in. I'm a bit confused by the text that's on the screen. Is that being proposed as a new part of the constitution or new policy? Because the way I read it, if a lot of Councillor Circus's concerns are addressed in this, that questions have to be submitted, they're going to be chosen by the person presiding, so that you can choose which ones are going to be addressed. So if it just said are relevant to the business transacted by the council, then surely that covers it. It doesn't have to be something that's at the meeting, but it could be anything that the resident who has to be on the electoral roll wants to raise with us.
Yeah. No, for the sake of clarification, yes, what is on the screen is what we're being asked to accept as a change to the constitution. So we will be voting on it, and if it's approved, it'll go to the full council, the next full council meeting, to be no doubt debated and then voted again.
Right, in which case, can I ask that that sentence is amended so that it's relevant to the business transacted by the council?
I would change the meaning of it.
Councillor Circus, what do you want to do with it? It's your proposal.
Well, it's not in a sense my proposal, Chairman. It is the proposal from the majority Conservative group. So this was discussed at length, as you know, Chairman, and that is the view of the majority Conservative group. That is what they want as the policy. And I suppose if you changed it in the way that Councillor Haigh suggested, you would obviously not be reflecting the view of the majority group on this subject. I suppose if I anticipated that there might be some resistance to this within the committee, and I suppose it may be the only way to resolve this is to have a debate and vote on this at full council.
Okay, so keep Sharon, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just deal with the point of order. So if this is a motion that is being put forward for this committee, then Councillor Haigh is entitled to amend, and to amend, so instead of saying business to be transacted at the meeting, it would say business transacted by the council. And then so that would need a second, it would need to be seconded, and then that would go to the vote. So with regard to procedure, that's what if Councillor Haigh wants to put forward that amendment and we get that seconded, and then we'll go from there, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Haigh, do you wish to do what has been suggested?
Yes, thank you. I am proposing that as an amendment.
And who's going to second it? I guess maybe Councillor Skip.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So going back to the monitoring officer, then you need to do the vote, I guess.
Yes, Chairman, that's right. So if it's worth just, I don't know if you're happy for me to read that out with Councillor Haig's proposed amendment.
Yes, please.
And then it will be that go to the vote. Okay. So the recommendation going before this committee is a maximum time of 15 minutes is to be allowed in the meeting to receive oral questions and answers, not statements, which in the opinion of the person presiding at the meeting are relevant to the business to be transacted by the council. A copy of any such questions must be submitted in writing no later than 3 working days prior to the relevant meeting. Questions can only be asked by residents who are identified as such from the voters list, or from anyone who satisfies the monitoring officer that they work wholly or in substantial parts within Horsham District, as deemed appropriate. In the absolute discretion of the person responding, answers may be given either orally or else in writing within 3 working days of the relevant meeting.
Thank you.
Do you want me to? I was just going to say, do you want me to do a roll call for this vote on the amended?
Yeah, I will do, but I'm very sorry. I've overlooked the fact that Councillor Bradnam wanted to comment. So let me bring in Councillor Bradnam before we vote on it, please.
Oh, Chairman, as you know, I'm not very happy about this, but I take your advice. I mean, we did discuss it at length in our group. I think there was a certain amount of fear amongst some members that, you know, the meetings will be hijacked by, you know, Extinction Rebellion and the like. But of course, these things are transient, really. I mean, there's a lot of shouting and hoo-ha about one thing or another at the time, and then after a few months it dies down. So I personally didn't see that as a problem, but I mean, you know, I would be happy to leave it as it is, because that's what our group's decided. And I mean, we're a controlling group, we have to leave it as it is, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, please, can we take the vote? This is for Councillor Haig's amendment.
Right. Okay. Councillor Baldwin.
Against.
Councillor Bradnam.
Against.
Councillor Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Circus.
Against.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
Councillor Skip.
Or
Right, so that was 2 for and 6 against. So the motion with the amendment is lost.
Okay. Thank you. So now we have to. I'm just checking. There's nobody else. I beg you, Councillor Bradnam, your hand's still up. Do you still want to speak?
No, I don't know why it hasn't gone down. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm just checking. Nobody else has got their hand up. So I think we now have to take a vote on the proposal in front of us, which is on the screen.
Yes.
So please, can the officer do the roll call again, so we can be clear?
So, Chairman, just to be clear, we're going back to the original substantive motion, and that is the one that's on the screen in front of us.
Who seconded it? Who seconded it?
Good point.
Absolutely right. Who seconded?
Well done. Who's seconding it?
I'll second it. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Thank you for Councillor Bradnam for the point of order.
Okay, so for the wording on the screen, Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Circus.
For.
Councillor Haig.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Skip.
against.
So that was 6 in favour and 2 against.
Okay, so no doubt we'll be revisiting this at the council meeting in December. I think we now need to move on to, I'll just check nobody wants to speak. I think we need to move on now to item 7, which is representatives on outdoor bodies, which was an issue which was brought to my attention. Can the monitoring officer, hopefully you've got a screen explaining what the appointment relevant bit of the Constitution is. Sharon, have you got one?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have the relevant screen shot, but I do have the detail in front of me. So there has been some confusion with regard to the appointment of outside bodies, and it's whether there's been a Horsham tradition as such, but a constitutional change that happened that possibly was overlooked. We're not entirely sure, but appointments outside bodies, and the Constitution says functions of full council, and it says only the full council can exercise the following functions: appointing representatives to joint authorities, joint committees and other outside bodies, unless the appointment is a cabinet function or has been delegated by council. So from the research that we've done, and again, this is pre my time here as the monitoring officer, I can't find anywhere that certainly in the last couple of years and since my watch as such, that says or states anywhere that has been delegated formally. That doesn't mean that hasn't happened. So It's traditionally what has happened in the past, and again, it's unfortunate that we don't have Leslie Morgan here, our Democratic Services Manager, because she would know exactly how this was all played out and what the true intention was. But in the past, the appointment has been done by the leader, but that is in consultation with the leader of the opposition also. So it hasn't been something that the leader has just gone ahead and done. It has been in consultation with the opposition leader. But we don't have anything that clearly states that. So what or clearly shows that it's been delegated to cabinet, and it's really for this committee to decide if that is something that will be or should be, as it is in many councils. It is delegated to the cabinet to decide as a cabinet function, or even delegated to the leader as a cabinet member, as he is at the present time. So it's really to make sure that we have some clarity, and it is something that we look at the beginning of each municipal year, and that's how this has come about. Because I think, and the chairman may have more insights, but I think there has been some confusion as to how the appointment is made at this council. So we just wanted to give some thought to that. But also some clarity, and have that reflected properly and correctly in the Constitution. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So from what you're saying, can either the leader or the cabinet appoint people to the outside bodies, or can we say we want the council to do it?
Yes, you can, Chairman. So
all three.
That's right. So it can be a full. Well, what generally happens at most councils and authorities, certainly that I've worked at and has happened to date here, is that the decisions are made, and again, that's not by just the leader solely. That is with the opposition leader together. And then that recommendation goes up to full council. So it's almost like the decision or the names have been put out or listed, and then it's just formalised at full council. So a list is kind of put in front of full council and it's noted, and that's how it traditionally has happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring in the speakers, can I just ask if Councillor Skip, does he recall last year, were you consulted on any of the Lib Dem councillors being asked if they wanted to be on an outside body? Do you recall?
No, was never asked. Never consulted.
So I think we probably slipped up, but wait a minute, let's see what. Councillor Mitchell, you've got your hand up.
We did discuss this in 2016, 2015 as part of the Constitution, and what we were trying to do with the Constitution, there were things going to full council that shouldn't have, things that cabinet members were deciding which should have gone to council, and things that went to council that the cabinet member was meant to decide and not full council. And outside bodies was discussed, and the advice we were given is that first of all, taking to when I joined the council, and the same with other senior members, there are firstly very few now outside bodies. I mean, we had outside bodies on Citizen Advice Bureau and the like. So first of all, there's much fewer. But it was clear that from the legislation, the advice we had, that appointment to the overwhelming number of outside bodies is a function of the cabinet, not full council. So yes, historically and traditionally, more often than not, full council did do it. There were a couple of exceptions. And so really, I think when the clock was reset after we adopted the Constitution in December 16, the annual meeting of council in May 17, which was I've just got the agenda up. So that's the 24th of May 17. The only outside body that was brought to full council was the Henfield Joint Committee. And so it is a function, and it was agreed that the cabinet members would appoint those, very few. Now, that all said, I hear Councillor Skip's comment and observation. appointment onto outside bodies, I don't see any reason why that's not dealt with any differently to nominations onto committees, because what we were advised is that under the legislation of the Local Government Act, the Chief Executive has to receive a nomination paper from the group leaders as to who the nomination is for committees. And I would have thought that that is the same for outside bodies. So the Chief Executive would receive from the leader, these are the nominations for these 2 or 3 outside bodies. How those names reach that piece of paper, of course, best practice is that an email should go out and say, is anyone interested in being on such and such outside body? But what I don't want is that we start winding back the clock where things are slipping back into full council that legally are not supposed to be there, and then full council, what happens, it causes confusion that members then think that council has this omnipotent decision-making body, which sadly it doesn't, because there are very few matters that are the preserve of full council if we have, which we do have, a cabinet model. So we were really clear that if it wasn't a council function, it was cabinet. And so that's the answer as to outside bodies. The cabinet appoint them. Say for Henfield Joint, and there's one other, it might be, I think somebody sits as a member of convention or whatever on Sussex University. There's one other antiquated but not unimportant one that full council decides. But
this kitchen's on GATCOM.
Yeah, well, those are all appointments by the leader. Through cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I'm glad you're on this committee. Right, Councillor Bradnam.
Well, Chairman, it's quite strange listening to what Councillor Mitchell has just said, because I don't even know which outside bodies, if any, that are available. And I don't ever recall being asked to sit on one, or if I wanted to put my name forward for one. So I personally think it should be done by the cabinet, not by the leader, because the leader has all these various PDAGs and committees to work out anyway. So my suggestion is it should go to cabinet.
Okay.
But all members, including the opposition, should have the opportunity to put themselves forward if they wish. Thank you.
I agree. Councillor Mitchell, did you want to come back?
I was meaning leader cabinet interchangeably. It's a cabinet appointment as to who goes on the PDAGs. What has slipped, can I just make a last aside, and it's not in the Constitution. When I was chairman, and I think Councillor Peter Burgess did the same, we were keen that at the end of the agenda that there was a wrap-up, a mop-up for those on outside bodies to do reports, such as those from Henfield Joint Common. And it was just a very quick 2 or 3 minutes stand-up oral report. Councillor Kitchen has done it on behalf of GATCOM, and I think that should remain a regularity so that people just are abreast of what's going on.
Okay, you did, I think it was a slip of the tongue. You mentioned PDAG, but I think you meant outside.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I meant outside bodies. But the leader, sorry, the cabinet appoint those to the outside bodies, but at the end of the council agenda, just before the close of the business, we put aside 5 minutes. The monitoring officer will see previous agendas where some chairmen have been robust at having it on and others where it's slipped off. And just for a 1 minute oral report, just to keep us abreast.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tony Bevis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. When I came back onto the council in 2019, I was actually quite keen to get on the Way and Aaron committee, which is an outside appointment. And being naive, I looked at the Constitution and looked at the functions of full council, and one of the functions of full council is to appoint representatives on outside bodies. So I assume naively that because it's in black and white in our Constitution, that's how things were done. And I also saw that the first meeting after the first full council meeting was where it would be done. So I fully expected somehow or other that appointments would be made at that council meeting. In fact, it wasn't until the December meeting that the leader actually announced who was going to be representing us on various outside bodies, apparently without any consultation, certainly without any consultation of any of the minority groups. So I accept that Councillor Mitchell's interpretation may well be right, but if it is right, then the Constitution is wrong and clearly needs to be changed, because there is nothing anywhere that I have been able to find which defines any outside bodies where it's reserved to Cabinet or to the leader to appoint.
Okay, thank you. We do need to get this sorted out, because clearly there is a discrepancy. We can't allow it to drift. We need to make sure the Constitution is clear as to who's responsible. But let me bring in the other two speakers who have so far asked to talk. Is Councillor Circus, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The first point I'd make is that, you know, we're talking about a very disparate group of appointments. Now, for example, I sit on something called the Inter-Authority Waste Group. It would be bonkers for it to be even thought that somebody else should sit on the Inter-Authority Waste Group than the Cabinet member of Horsham District Council for Waste. So that is one sort of appointment. There are other appointments, such as we've been told about the Way and Arun Canal Board, where it would be not so important to have a particular person sitting on that board. I would just mention one other thing. When I was the Cabinet member for Housing, I had a visit, made a visit to Saxon Weald, and one of the things the Chief Executive said to me was, I said, well, why haven't you got councillors? Why have you lost the link with, you were set up to have a very close relationship with Horsham District Council when you took over the social housing from HDC. Why have you not got, given your continuing role, why haven't you got a prominent role for councillors in your board? And what he said was, I'm sorry to put it in these terms, but they were the terms that he used, that Horsham was increasingly not appointing people of sufficient stature and gravitas and importance within the organisation to justify being members of the board, given that we have a legal obligation to appoint the best people, the most suitable people to be members of our board. I just leave that thought with you.
Councillor Skip.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. My recollection is slightly different. When I first came on the council after about a year, there was a leader called Councillor Nye, and I remember Councillor Nye came up to me and said, would I go and sit on the health and overview scrutiny at county to represent the council. Now, my impression then was that the outside appointments were therefore made via the leader or by the leader, possibly with discussion with the cabinet. I don't know, but I think it's a rather grey area, and I think I agree with you. It needs resolving one way or the other, just so we know where we are.
Thank you. Can I go back to the monitoring officer? Sharon, I think it might be useful if we were to have a full list of which outside bodies there are, because there aren't that many now, and who the Constitution seems to think, according to the Constitution, is responsible for appointing them. And then at our next governance meeting, we can review this with the full facts, because Councillor Mitchell is right. Years ago, we used to have representatives on places like Springboard, Citizens Advice. There were several. And over the years, and Saxon Weald, in fact, I'm sure Councillor Beavis was one of our directors with Councillor Donnelly at one time, and Councillor Bernard Baldwin. So I think it would be handy if we had a list of all the outside bodies we're expected to have representation on. And what the Constitution tells us is cabinet or council or leader, and then we'll review it at the next meeting. If that's my suggestion, unless anybody wishes to do otherwise, please shout.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there are a few, as you go through the Constitution, and I can certainly prepare that for next time if it's helpful. There are certain outside bodies, it crops up, but certainly for the beginning, it crops up in various places. It is certainly clear from what Councillor Bevis has said this evening that it does say functions of full council to appoint representatives. So that's one place where it does come up. But I can certainly say to this committee that when we were gearing up for the municipal year and when people were elected and seats were taken, I definitely witnessed emails going round, I think from the leader to the chief exec, with regard to appointing, and there was mention of making sure the political balance was correct. So this wasn't something that was done behind closed doors or done in any secret if anyone's thinking that. And I remember certainly at the time the leader did have lots of appointments of responsibility at the time to put names in those places. So whether it's something that has been muddied somewhere, and I'm pretty sure it has been delegated to Cabinet. I think that was probably the intention, but we just don't have that clarity at the moment. So I can certainly, there is a relatively long list. I think it's about 11 outside bodies. Citizens' Advice was, as Councillor Mitchell mentioned, was on there. Don't think it's on there now. But it would be interesting to see all of those that still remain on there. And we can certainly have that ready and the reports ready with the agenda so that members can make an informed choice.
I think that would be logical.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, because it is muddy. It's another example where it's not clear, and there's nothing worse than, I like it black or white, pardon the expression, but I don't like it grey. We have to know exactly whether it's cabinet or leader or council. We don't want it to be wishy-washy. We need to be clear as to responsibilities. And also, I think it would be handy to have the up-to-date list, because I know it's shorter than it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
So if everybody's in agreement, I suggest we postpone this until the next meeting, when we'll have all the facts and we can make a decision. Councillor Skip.
My button.
David, do you want to speak? Yeah.
Not really. My button isn't working, so I'll keep pressing the blue hand. Maybe it's the blue hand that does it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I saw your blue hand, so I thought you wanted to come back on that, but no. So we seem to be clear then. That's what we'll do. I've not got any more blue hands up, so I think if that's with your agreement, we'll do that, which leads us on to the last item, which is item 8, urgent business. I don't have any. So at just about 7 o'clock, I think that's the end of the meeting, but I thank you all for attending, and we'll have to get a date in from monitoring officer for the next one. We don't have one, do we, yet?
No, Chairman, we don't have one set in the diary as yet, but
okay.
But
I think next year it might be an idea to set them in the diary, but between you and I,